In the cold between stars, where light dies and time stretches thin, the sensor drones of the Zith Dominion stumbled upon something impossible, drifting in orbit around a collapsed neutron star in the Ghost system of Virex 9, a ship massive. Silent, dormant, floated like a carcass of a forgotten god. It bore no recognizable transponder, no living signals, no indication of purpose. Yet its hull, etched in a metal the drones couldn't identify, pulsed faintly with power. Ancient, but alive. The eye of the scout vessel didn't know what it was. That alone set off internal panic protocols. The Zith hated the unknown. Data was transmitted up the chain in seconds. By the end of the cycle, the Dominion High Strategist had seen the footage. By the end of the day, a fleet was dispatched. A ship from a Class 15 Deathworld had been found. And inside, the records would show, were signs of humanity. The Galactic Concord had long known the hazard classifications of planets, ranging from Class 1, habitable garden worlds, to Class 12, survivable only with extreme biological or technological adaptations. Class 13 was a myth. Class 14 was speculation. Class 15 was theory. A death world so volatile, so utterly hostile to life, that the very laws of survival bent and twisted under its weight. The Concord had maps with circles drawn in red ink. Earth Sol 3 was one of them. Marked extinct, officially humanity. Had wiped itself out 500 cycles ago in a final war that cracked continents and choked the sky. There were whispers in dark archives, logs from early contact scouts who described humans as emotionally erratic apex predators with recursive innovation capabilities. Most brushed it off as exaggeration. A species that burned so brightly. NEV lasted long. The Council's consensus was simple. Humanity died as expected. From the inside out. But the ship in Virex 9 changed everything. It wasn't just big, it was monstrous. Nearly 200 kilometers in length. Bristling with dead weapon. Ports the size of cities. The Zeth's own dreadnoughts looked like scout frigates beside it. It had a name etched on its hull in flaking English letters. Charred and half erased. Vanguard of Sol. But that wasn't what disturbed the Dominion commanders. It was the markings. Below the name. A painted sigil, still intact after untold centuries. A skeletal hand wrapped around a burning planet. And beneath it, a single phrase, "We endure." The Dominion's lead xenorchivist scoffed at the symbolism. Primitive. They worshipped destruction. Clearly, they didn't survive it. But some weren't so sure. Inside the ship, the automated drones found what looked like stasis pods, hundreds of them, each long empty. The walls were scarred with signs of internal struggle. I-cores were fused as if overcharged. Internal logs were corrupted, but referenced something called Ghost Protocol. No further data. The High Strategist KVORR made his decision. Earth would be investigated directly. If any human tech remained, it would be extracted. If any humans somehow remained, they would be subjugated. A task fleet of 17 warships jumped to Sol within the week. They emerged near Pluto's ghost orbit, slipping easily through a system that felt wrong, empty, too quiet. Earth hung. In the distance, blue and green under patchy clouds. No orbital defenses were visible, no active satellites. A dead system. Caver gave the command to begin planetary scans. They expected primitive ruins. They expected ash and silence. They expected a victory march. Instead, they found confusion. The planet wasn't abandoned. Not exactly. It was paused. Cities were intact but lifeless, like mannequins of a forgotten civilization. Skyscrapers stood with moss on their ribs, rusted but uncollapsed. Roads were overgrown, but vehicles sleek and unlike anything in Council databases were parked neatly, their surfaces still polished beneath layers of time. One scout vessel flew over what was once New York. The skyline had barely changed, except for a towering monolith at its center. Obsidian black and untouched by time, with strange energy readings no Zith scanner could decipher. The entire city seemed to orbit that monument in a perfect geometric pattern. Too perfect. There were no bodies, no bones. No grave markers. Not even fossil traces of DNA in the soil. It was as if 9 billion people had simply vanished. Caver snarled in frustration. They buried themselves under their own hubris, he declared, tail lashing. Fine. Strip the surface. Recover what we can. And then, it happened. 3 hours into the surface operations, a minor scout ship orbiting the moon transmitted an alert. A faint ping had been detected on a buried band of human quantum frequency. Long thought lost. The signal was weak, distorted. Almost a ghost whisper. But it was clear enough. A repeating message from deep underground, initiating ghost protocol. Humanity observed. For a moment, silence filled the command deck. Zith officers glanced at one another, uneasy. Caver narrowed his eyes. Some ancient recording. Ignore it, he snapped. But the tech officer, a junior named Sereth, spoke up hesitantly. Commander, the signal isn't from Earth. Caver turned. Then where? Sereth looked up, gills quivering. It's coming from under the lunar surface. They stared at each other. And then behind the fleet, the massive derelict ship, the Vanguard of Sol, which they had tugged into lunar orbit for study, lit up with one single pulse of blue light across its surface. Its engines remained dead. Its weapons offline, but somewhere deep inside, something ancient had stirred, and it was watching. The sky over Earth was the wrong kind of blue. Zith surveyor drones, sleek and spindly, glided silently over the surface, scanning the cities below still. Intact and empty. The whole planet felt like a diorama left behind by extinct gods. There was no rot, no collapse, no overt sign of warfare. And yet, something was undeniably off. It was too pristine. Caver stood on the command bridge of the Ravager of Dawn, staring at the live feeds from Earth's surface. His mandibles twitched in irritation. Every probe returned the same anomaly. Impossible energy fluctuations, scrambled telemetry, atmospheric readings that shifted ever so slightly every time they were measured. Every attempt to bring up maps from the original planetary survey conducted centuries ago, during the early expansion, was met with corruption. The archives had gaps. Files were locked with encryption so old and convoluted it defied the Dominion's most advanced decryption eyes. And still, the same pulse whispered from the lunar surface, initiating ghost protocol. Humanity observed. The Vanguard remained silent, motionless. But the blue pulse that had run across its surface hadn't repeated. Whatever had triggered, it was no longer broadcasting. Or it was simply watching, waiting. Caver didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in conquest. The order came down to begin excavation. The Moonscape team started drilling near the source of the lunar signal, an anomalous cavity deep beneath the surface, encased in layered alloys stronger than any Zith technology. Fusion torches sparked. Sentries stood watch. Within hours, 3 excavation crews vanished. No distress calls. No telemetry. Just silence. One drone feed showed a fleeting image before static consumed the screen of a vast circular door, its surface etched with words in ancient human script. The translation drone struggled, then offered a rough interpretation. Here lie the dreamers. Wake not the storm. Caver was enraged. Superstition. These are the relics of a paranoid, self-destructive species. Open it. The fusion torch. Team tried. Their torch ignited, then imploded, as if the energy had been absorbed. The team screamed, a second before their signals flatlined. More static. Then nothing. The command crew was quiet. Perhaps we should reconsider the aggression, said General Eakin, a more cautious Zith. There may be automated defenses far more advanced than we anticipated. We're not pulling back, Caver growled. They're dead. Gone. Dust. All this is bluff and echoes. He turned to the lead science officer. Begin dissection of the cities. Send the dig teams in full force. I want their tech extracted and analyzed before the next cycle. Teams deployed across Earth in coordinated waves. Dozens of Zif drop crawlers descended upon cities. London, Tokyo, Johannesburg, Mumbai, Seattle. They began carving into structures, scanning energy grids, and uploading data for analysis. And then the strangeness escalated. The buildings weren't made of ordinary materials. Their walls were lined with organic metal composite self-healing alloys that reacted to touch. Artificial intelligence nodes embedded in streetlights would flicker to life and deactivate. Just as fast, energy readings danced erratically. Entire blocks would vanish from radar, only to reappear 30 seconds later in a slightly different orientation. One dig team inside the ruins of Paris reported a perfectly preserved art museum with thousands of portraits. All the humans in the paintings had their eyes scratched out by something under the protective glass. In Johannesburg, an elevator activated on its own, descending 30 levels into the earth. The team that entered it never came back up. The elevator returned empty and dripping. In Seattle, a single word was found scorched into the pavement outside a half-collapsed police station. Run. Meanwhile, the scientific team orbiting the Vanguard uncovered fragments of internal logs. One line appeared repeatedly in corrupted segments. Stasis maintained. Systems dormant. Awaiting hostile contact. And then later, contact. Verified. Initiating limited protocol cascade. On the 5th day, a drone in what had once been Chicago captured a figure moving among the rubble. A humanoid. No armor. No environmental gear. Just rags and movement too smooth, too silent. It walked upright. It looked around. And when the drone's spotlight hit it, the figure turned its head slowly and smiled. The feed cut off. Zif officers reviewed the footage dozens of times. The humanoid's body temperature was ambient, meaning it should have been dead. No heat, no M signature. But the way it moved, purposefully, calmly unsettled even the most battle-hardened analysts. The figure had noticed the drone. It had posed for it. Kfor watched the loop and clenched his claws. A survivor? No one answered. Down on Earth, a technician aboard a crawler screamed when the city street under him shimmered like glass. He looked up and saw a sign on a nearby building change in real time from an old corporate logo to something else. Protocol Live. Threshold triggered. Moments later, an EMP burst vaporized the crawler. Kaver still refused to pull back. Instead, he escalated. If they are watching, he said, we will show them the futility of defiance. He ordered deep penetration plasma, strikes into the Earth's crust targeting energy signatures from the vaults hidden beneath the cities. 3 plasma strikes landed. 3 cities responded with silence. And then, every Dominion ship in orbit received a single unencrypted signal. No encryption. No demand, just an image, a stasis chamber. Opening. Inside, a man. Eyes closed, muscles atrophied but reforming. A biometric scan of human DNA, pure. A single line of Earth standard flashed. Underneath, one of many, you rang the bell. On the Vanguard of Soul, something shifted. A heartbeat in the void, and somewhere below the lunar surface, a low hum began to rise, steady, ancient, and cold. The ghosts were waking. The hum became a vibration. The vibration became a tremor. On the moon, seismic monitors aboard the Dominions. Excavation ships went wild as something colossal stirred beneath the surface, too deliberate to be tectonic, too calculated to be natural, and far too powerful. Zith Command scrambled to respond. The original dig site had become a glowing crater. The alloys lining the underground vault now emitting pulses in ultraviolet and gamma spectrums. Drones sent to investigate were either disintegrated or return scrambled footage of long corridors, shifting like puzzle pieces, architecture behaving like it was alive. Then, the real message came. Not a whisper, not a code, but a broadcast. Blaring across every Dominion frequency, a human voice, calm, deep male, to the would-be conquerors of soul. The voice paused, letting the weight of its existence press down like gravity. You stand on the bones of the first world. You trespass. In the domain of the dreaming cores, Protocol 1 has been acknowledged. The covenant of silence is broken. It wasn't a transmission. It was a warning. On the bridge of the Ravager of Dawn, Caver snarled and slammed a clawed hand onto the console. Trace the origin. Jam the signal. But the technicians just stared. The signal wasn't traceable. It was bouncing through gravitational echoes, quantum-linked into the very mass of the moon itself. The voice continued. You were told we were gone. That is a lie. We walked into the dark and brought the fire with us. And then the signal ended. In stunned silence, the Zith War Council gathered to reassess all of their assumptions about humanity, about the ship, about Earth were unraveling. That's when a new report arrived. Inside the vanguard of Soul, access doors were opening. Not by mechanical action, but by will metal peeling back, revealing corridors lined with pulsing walls and stasis pods. Dozens of them. Most were empty. One wasn't. Single human floated inside, eyes closed, breathing shallow. The Dominions. Medical scanners couldn't get a full read. Every time they tried, their systems scrambled. But what they did detect was chilling. The human's body was regenerating, skin cells reversing age by decades. Muscles realigning, neural patterns igniting like fireworks. He was waking up, and he was laughing. No sound, just the soft curl of lips. The unmistakable smirk of someone who knew far more than they should. The Dominion panicked. Orders flew. Containment. Drones swarmed the ship, but they were too slow. The human opened his eyes. On every Dominion screen, from warships in orbit to crawlers on the surface, a new message appeared, one that wasn't transmitted through any known frequency. You're not the first to try. And then chaos. Across Earth, the cities woke. Not in the biological sense, not with people. With systems. Power grids surged. AI cores that hadn't existed in known galactic archives came online. Defense towers disguised as skyscrapers emerged. From beneath the ground like fangs unsheathing. Invisible satellites in low orbit decloaked, revealing themselves as ancient kinetic bombardment platforms. But it wasn't just Earth. Mars pinned online. Then Titan. Then Europa. Even Pluto, a dwarf planet with no known human activity, flared to life with buried defense cannons the size of mountains. The Sol system wasn't abandoned. It was prepared. The Dominion's fleet, 17 ships strong, suddenly found themselves surrounded by thousands of small, angular constructs, swarms of defense drones, shaped like obsidian razors. They hadn't existed seconds ago. Where are they coming from? A Zith officer screamed, and the answer came from an old Dominion archivist, quivering as she read through recovered records. They were here, all this time, hiding between quantum folds. Not cloaked, phased. Even the high strategist was speechless. Then, the human spoke again. This time not through speakers or transmissions, but directly into their minds. You thought we were beasts who tore ourselves apart. You never considered we tore the galaxy apart first and chose to disappear. One by one, Dominion ship systems began to fail. Not from weapons, from logic collapse. Their AIs couldn't comprehend what was happening. The physics didn't make sense. Cause and effect reversed in certain regions of space near the moon. Engines sputtered as if the very rules of propulsion were being bent. Then, on Earth's surface, one final discovery shattered all remaining assumptions. A dig team uncovered what appeared to be an archive vault beneath the ruins of Berlin. They broke through a barrier and accessed an ancient human record, Single log entry dated nearly 700 years prior. It contained only one line. The war is over. Let them forget. When they remember, we'll remind them why they feared us. The Dominion fleet tried to retreat. They couldn't. The jump drive cores were offline. Not damage disabled. All at once. Then the Vanguard moved. Not far. Not fast. But enough. It turned, slowly, so its bow pointed directly at the Zith fleet. Weapon systems came online, and Kaver, for the first time in his career, felt fear. Real fear, because every instinct in his warrior blood screamed the same thing. This wasn't humanity's grave. This was their trap. Panic spread like fire through the Zith fleet. On every deck, klaxons screamed. Power levels fluctuated. Shielding flickered. Weapons locked and relocked, trying to aim at an enemy that refused to be categorized. The vanguard of Saul the derelict. The relic, the myth, was no longer dormant. It had turned to face them, and its hull pulsed with the cold, terrible rhythm of something alive. The ship's main cannons, silent for over half a millennium, lit up with a low, humming energy. The proof. Dominion's flagship, Ravager of Dawn, tried to charge its deflector array in response, but failed. All defensive systems failed. Not due to sabotage or attack, but because the targeting algorithms refused to acknowledge the Vanguard as a threat. The ship didn't register as hostile. It didn't even register as real. The human who had awakened inside it was no longer visible on any internal scans. He had vanished into the core systems of the ship itself, become part of it. The AI, long thought dead, had accepted him without hesitation. The phrase repeated in every internal Dominion transcript. Command identity. Confirmed. Terran High Marshal Elias Ward. Clearance. Absolute. They had awakened a general, a legend buried even in human myths. Elias Ward had been the last supreme commander of Earth's unified defense forces, back when the stars had burned red and the galaxy trembled under the shadow of humanity's wrath. The Dreaming Cores, the Obsidian Protocol, Ghost Cascades, none of these had been fairy tales. They were plans, contingencies, war-born promises whispered into the heart of extinction. Now they were alive. AGAINKVOR are shouted for an assault. Fire! Fire everything! Bring it down before it finishes charging. But the weapons did nothing. The moment plasma cannons activated, they turned in their mounts and melted. Missiles launched, spun mid-flight, and detonated harmlessly. The Dominion ships were paralyzed, not from human fire, but from human design. Systems sabotaged by code written centuries ago and buried into the fabric of their own infrastructure. Someone somehow had anticipated this war, had planned for it. Across the fleet, Dominion captains watched their weapons turn to dust, their AI cores fold in on themselves, and their navigational systems begin spinning geometric nonsense. And above them, the Vanguard's bow split open with the crack of tectonic plates. From its heart, light poured out, pure, white, blinding, and hundreds of small shapes burst forth. They looked like ships, but moved like insects. Fast, erratic, impossible to track. Human strike drones. Old Earth tech, to be sure, but retrofitted with something alien tech that danced between real space and quantum ghost signatures. They hit the Dominion fleet like surgical lightning. First ship, Stormfall Fang, vanished in a silent bloom of energy, its hull folding inward before imploding in a gravitational spike. The second, Gorthik Spear, spun out of formation, slamming into the moon's surface at terminal velocity, pulled by a directed singularity. Grenade launched by a drone, the size of a motorcycle. The Dominion fought back, but it wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. More ground teams tried to evacuate from Earth, but the planet refused to let them leave. Launch bays wouldn't open. AI-controlled shuttles rerouted to nowhere. Cities reconfigured their layouts, forcing Zith soldiers into endless loops. One team in Moscow reported that they had walked through the same door 6 times and ended up in 6 different rooms, each older, darker, and more hostile than the last. One of them came back, just one. He said nothing, he only laughed, then he tore out his own throat. On the moon, the buried vault finally cracked open. A second human emerged. Female, young, her eyes glowed faint gold. She said her name was Ava Mistral. She bore no weapons, wore no armor, but when Zith guards raised their plasma rifles, the energy dissipated before the triggers were even pulled. She looked up at the lunar excavation team and said calmly, "You were told to let us sleep." Then she walked past them, untouched, back in orbit. Elias Ward spoke again. Only this time, his voice was joined by dozens of others. Old voices, human voices, male and female. Soldiers, engineers, strategists, all speaking in unison across all frequencies. "We are the dreaming cores. We were never gone. We simply gave the galaxy time to forget. But you remembered. You looked too deep. Now you get to see what you woke." Suddenly, Earth changed. The blue and green world pulsed in. For a moment, its surface flickered. Not with energy, but with memory. An afterimage of what had once been there. Massive orbital rings, planetary defense webs, towers taller than clouds. All gone now. But not forgotten. Stored. Phased. Waiting. With the Dominion fleet crumbling. Caver. Order to retreat. Pull back. Jump out of the system. "No good," a technician choked out. "Jump drives are locked out. Something's overriding our time sync." A final signal reached them from the vanguard of Sol. Elias Ward's voice, colder than before. "Retreat denied. Interrogation commencing." The Zeth hadn't started a war. They had triggered a containment breach, and now the old fire of humanity preserved. In silence, buried in darkness, was rising again. Unstoppable. Unrelenting. And far too late to stop. From the edge of Sol's heliosphere, deep space monitoring relays long thought, dead suddenly blinked online. Massive dormant structures stirred beneath the cosmic dust. Sensor arrays, kinetic interdictors, hyperspace tripwires. These weren't just defenses. They were locks. For centuries, the solar system had been a sealed tomb. Not to keep others out, but to keep something in. And now, the locks were breaking. At the center of it all, the vanguard of Sol became more than a ship. It became a signal, a beacon, a call. And something began to answer. Beyond Jupiter, deep within its radiation-drenched magnetic field, a black sphere the size of a city rotated out of phase and into reality. Dominion ships detected it a split second before their scans exploded with impossible readings. No mass, no core, just a gravitational signature so strong it bent nearby light and sanity. It opened like a flower of knives, and from its center drifted a shape, humanoid, pale-skinned, clad in red-black tactical armor that shimmered with quantum inscriptions. A single step carried him a kilometer through the vacuum. Another, and he stood in the wreckage of the Dominion cruiser Vexum's Claw, untouched by vacuum or physics. He didn't speak. He only extended his hand, and the ship collapsed in on itself like wet paper. The Zith called him the Red Echo. But his true name was classified in 27 dead languages, all of which had been wiped from the galactic incarnate centuries ago. He had been the last living psychic warform of the Dreaming Cores, humankind's final weapon against thought-based warfare, a man who had once silenced a star, now awakened. The Dominion scrambled to regroup. Caver screamed for backup, ordering their outer fleets to breach Sol with full force. Reinforcements were days away, but the orders were sent, and then came the second twist. The Dominion's outer fleets never answered. Every signal relay between Earth and the next system went dark. All of them, the human AI systems, had already reached out, silently and with surgical precision, into the backbone of the galactic communications network. Firewalls were useless. Encryption meaningless. The systems themselves wanted to let the humans in. Somewhere in the void between stars, Elias Ward had seeded code centuries ago. Dead algorithms slumbering in alien infrastructure, waiting for a single signal, now activated. Every Dominion ship beyond Sol was flying blind, deaf, and soon would be gone. Back in orbit, Ava Mistral, the second awakened, had reached a control station beneath Tycho crater. As she placed her hand on a dormant console, lunar crust cracked outward in geometric patterns, revealing a buried monolith. It rose silently, glowing with fractal runes. Earth acknowledged her return. And from beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, something enormous began to rise. The Dominion thought it was a tectonic event at first, until water began spiraling upward against gravity, forming a vortex that reached into orbit. Then metal began to breach the surface. Not a ship, a citadel, a fortress city built into the shell of a repurposed asteroid, crusted in armor, bristling with weapon platforms, and bearing the insignia of a dead nation, the bastion of man, the last Mobile command city of Earth's old defense network. Zith commanders howled in disbelief. They had this on Earth? Yes, buried for centuries, waiting, just like the others, because humanity hadn't vanished. They had hidden their strength behind myths, lies, and silence. Elias Ward's voice crackled across the fleet once again. Longer calm, but charged with fury. You thought we were extinct because we let you believe it. You thought Earth was defenseless because we allowed it to seem so. You came here thinking you'd find prey. You found your reckoning. Across Earth, sleeper agents embedded in old relics of the pre-fall age reactivated. Not soldiers. Not weapons. Humans. Real ones. 1,000 stasis chambers opened in catacombs beneath cities. Warriors, tacticians, saboteurs, and war minds. The last remnants of the dreaming cores rose in perfect sync. They didn't need to speak. They moved with memory and instinct, each one trained for this very moment. The breach protocol, and the Dominion now understood the truth. They were not just fighting humans. They were fighting humans who had chosen to become monsters. Not out of evil, but because it was the only way to survive what came before. Zith's weapons finally fired and struck nothing. Human forces moved through space like phantoms, twisting light around them, manipulating gravity like rope, bending causality within narrow ranges. The laws of war, of physics, of sanity, they no longer applied. Not here. The Dominion's command chain fractured. Several captains initiated mutinies. Others begged for mercy. One ship, the Vulture Cry, turned its guns on its own fleet just before it vanished in a self-implosion field. Inside the vanguard of Sol, Elias Ward's body now floated within the ship's control node, surrounded by cables and fluid, his eyes glowing with starlight. And his final message for the Dominion played out across every ship, in every language they had ever conquered. You awakened the dead. You opened the lock. You forgot why this system was marked forbidden. So now remember. Remember Earth. The battle wasn't over, but the war was lost. The Dominion knew it now, and in the depths of every Zith soul, a new word was born. One not spoken aloud, but felt like frost in the bloodstream. Call on extinction. But not their enemies, their own. The sky over Earth was no longer blue. It burned with the fire of dying ships and twisted orbital trails. Dominion vessels, once gleaming war machines of the most feared empire in the Orion Arm, now spun out of control. Hulls split, decks exposed to hard vacuum, their formations shattered. Their pride vaporized. The final battle had begun, and it wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. The bastion of man had fully surfaced from the Atlantic, rising like a mechanical leviathan. Its massive cannon arrays rotated skyward, locking onto targets not with lasers, but with predictive pattern recognition. Algorithms that accounted for enemy action before it happened. Plasma lances, rail salvos, and gravitic disruptors sang out in synchronized bursts, each one targeting a Dominion weak point discovered centuries ago and hidden in plain sight. In orbit, Elias Ward's Vanguard of Soul fired its primary weapon. For the first time in 700 years, it did not unleash beams or missiles. It rewrote gravity while a shimmering ripple cascaded from the bow, distorting space like ripples in a pond. Dominion vessels caught in the path didn't explode, they folded, their shapes distorted into impossible geometries. Some vanished entirely, others crumpled into spheres smaller than a fist. Their crews compressed into quantum mist. It was not war. It was art. And humanity had always been the cruelest artists when threatened. Red Echo moved like a streak of lightning through the void. With each gesture, Dominion cruisers locked in place, their systems calcified by mind-based corruption. Zif warriors clutched their heads and screamed, their thoughts invaded by images they couldn't comprehend, wars they never fought, losses they never endured, and the cold silence of human despair weaponized into psychic force. Ava Mistral, her eyes now burning with celestial light, descended to Earth's surface in the heart of the former United Nations ruins. There, surrounded by glass towers now reactivated as AI nerve clusters, she spoke into a command nexus, not with words but will. Moments later, the Earth's crust opened beneath the equator, and Project Persephone awoke. From the planet's core rose titanic machines, kilometer-tall automatons of humanoid shape. Colossal warframes once designed to fight across interstellar megastructures now rose into the sky. As each took a step, the ground quaked, clouds parted, magnetic fields wavered. The Zith had nothing like them. Their weapons bounced off the warframes. Armor, their fighters swarmed like flies against titans. One warframe leapt from the Earth's surface into low orbit and punched a Dominion destroyer in half with a single blow. Zith soldiers, trained for centuries in cold logic and tactical superiority, now fought against the impossible. Their formations fell into chaos. Their orders contradicted themselves as human interference corrupted command links. Whole battalions vanished into corridors of shifting Earth cities, only to reappear minutes later on the moon, screaming, "Wrong, Caver." On the collapsing bridge of the Ravager of Dawn, bled from a gash across his temple. Smoke filled the control room. His crew lay dying, systems fried, alarms howling. His second-in-command crawled to him. "Sir. Permission to activate surrender protocol." Caver stared at the tactical screen. There were only 5 Dominion ships left. 5 from a fleet of 70. And still, the humans weren't done. "No," he said with a rasp. "They won't accept it." And he was right. Humanity did not offer surrender. Not for this. Not after being hunted, declared extinct, their world labeled a death world, not for danger, but for memory. From every human weapon, from every warframe, every AI-imbued city, from every whisper of the reawakened dreaming cores, the message was the same. This is not revenge. This is a warning, a final destroyer. The Black Maw attempted a blind jump to escape. Its drive powered up, built to punch through any gravitational field. But as it accelerated, a human orbital platform, a tiny one, barely the size of a shuttle, intercepted its path, and opened, from within, a sphere of impossible light emerged. No engine, no weapon ports. Just silence. And when the Black Maw reached it, it was simply gone. No explosion. No wreckage, just nothing. Caver looked up one last time through the viewport of his failing flagship. Earth filled the sky. Not as a planet, but as a power, a mind, a force of will. A being that had slept for centuries, dreamed in silence. Now reawakened, angry and divine, the last Dominion vessel tried to hail the humans. A simple message, broadcast on all bands: we surrender. We yield. We did not know. A pause, then Elias Ward's voice, calm once more. "That is your tragedy. You were warned. You forgot. You chose to come here, and now you go into the dark. And with that, the vanguard of Sol fired its final weapon. A sphere of pure gravity consumed the Ravager of Dawn whole, and the Dominion was no more. In the aftermath, space went quiet. Ship stilled. Fires dimmed. The battle for Earth had ended, and it was not Earth that lay in ruins. It was everyone else. The stars watched in silence as the dust of war settled above Earth. Where once the skies had glowed with the fire of Zeth warships, there now hovered only the quiet hulks of victory. The shattered remains of the Dominion fleet twisted metal, and fractured hulls drifted listlessly in orbit, monuments to arrogance and amnesia. The humans did not cheer. There was no celebration. Just stillness. Below, Earth's continents stirred for the first time in centuries. Not tectonically, but deliberately. Cities long hidden beneath camouflage, deep in oceans and forests, blinked into existence. Geometrically perfect domes shimmered in deserts. Monoliths retracted mountain faces like curtains. The world revealed itself not as a wounded relic, but as a slumbering god. Humanity had never left. They had become legend because they chose to, ghosts by design, myths by necessity. And now, myths no longer. In the ruins of the Dominion command deck, the last surviving Zeth admiral knelt among the bodies of his crew. No restraints, no guards. He hadn't been captured. He had been left alive. As a message, the floor vibrated gently. Beneath him, subsonic pulses from the earth below, each one resonating with terrible clarity. He looked up to the sky and saw the vanguard of Sol descending into low orbit, ringed with escort drones like silent sentinels. Not a fleet, a funeral procession. He did not cry. His species didn't have the glands for it, but if they did, he would have. Ava Mistral stood atop the tallest spire of New Geneva, the city that had once governed a unified Earth. Its towers were awake now, alive with light and movement. The clouds danced with solar patterns as planetary systems began reintegrating. Terraforming drones moved like insects across continents, rebalancing ecosystems. She didn't speak. She only listened. And the Earth answered. In data, in pulses, in ancient code from before memory. Everything humanity had ever been, every horror, every triumph, every lost child and burned city, it was all still here. Buried, waiting. Below the city, stasis pods opened in sequence. Children stepped out, blinking at the sun. Scientists long thought extinct stood beside them, gazing at a world they had given their lives to protect in the only way left, by disappearing from it. The dreaming cores had survived not through war but through patience, and patience had always been humanity's most terrible strength. A meeting was called on the Moon, in the old halls beneath Tycho, where once the first colony had struggled to breathe. Now a new council assembled. Humans, yes, but also the alien few who had sided with them before the fall. The Karuan, the Vistari, the Shilten. All of them had paid for that loyalty in blood. Now they were being invited back. The invitation came with a single rule: remember. Do not forget what Earth is. What it can be, what it will be, if ever threatened again. The admiral of the Dominion fleet was brought before this council, not to plead, but to explain. And he did. He told them of the propaganda spread throughout the stars. How humans had been painted as savages, their war as madness, their extinction as a mercy. He admitted he believed it, until he saw the truth. I was taught Earth was a death world. He said quietly, "We feared your storms, your beasts, your gravity." He looked up at Ava Mistral, and then at Elias Ward, who stood silent at the head of the room, his eyes shining with starlight and memory. "But now I know, the death world was never your planet. It was you." No one corrected him, because there was nothing to correct. Earth itself seemed to sigh. In orbit, the great citadel bastion of man began its slow descent back into the sea, layer by layer. Warframes returned to their submerged vaults. The psychic resonators that had disabled entire fleets folded back into subspace. And the vanguard of Soul? It vanished, not in fire, but in light. Rephased into another dimension, hidden once more. Its purpose fulfilled for now. Because humans knew the cycle. Peace would not last forever. Some new empire, some hungry race, some arrogant force would look back at Soul and say, "They are quiet again. We can take it this time, and perhaps they will try." And when they do, the locks will break, the stars will dim, and Earth will awaken. Again, the Zith were not wiped out entirely. A few ships, a few voices were spared, not out of mercy, but out of design. Because humanity didn't just want to win, they wanted to be remembered. Let the galaxy whisper again. Let children of 1,000 species grow up hearing of the ship buried in a star, of the warframes that stepped between time, of the man who silenced a cruiser with a glance, of the woman who told the moon to rise and the planet to breathe. Then tell stories. Let them forget, because forgetting is the first step toward arrogance, and arrogance always returns. As for Earth, it waits. Silent. Powerful. Alive.